The deadliest mistake modern survivalists make is the exact opposite of what kept Native Americans alive in impossible conditions. This one difference could mean life or death. Ever step outside and feel completely lost? Well, your ancestors never had that problem. They could read the ground like you read your phone screen, and honestly, they were way better at it. Native American tribes developed tracking skills so sharp they could tell you what someone had for breakfast 3 days ago just by looking at footprints. Sounds crazy, right? But the techniques are surprisingly simple once you know what to look for. Start with the basics. Fresh tracks have sharp, clean edges. Old ones look rounded and weathered like someone took sandpaper to them. Makes sense when you think about it. Wind, rain, and time smooth everything out. The deeper the print, the heavier the load, or the faster they were moving. Plains tribes could track a wounded bison for miles using nothing but these pressure clues. But here's where it gets interesting. Look for what trackers call story tracks, the little details that tell you everything. Scuff marks showed direction changes. Broken twigs at hip height, someone was carrying gear. Crushed grass that's still green underneath means you're maybe an hour behind them. Fresh droppings are your timeline. Animals don't hold it in for politeness. Then there's the pressure release method. And this one's pure genius. When you step down, your heel hits first, then your toe pushes off. Fast walkers dig deeper with their toes. Slow, careful steps leave even pressure. People carrying heavy loads, their heels sink deeper because they're fighting for balance. Cherokee hunters could tell if a deer was injured just by reading how it distributed weight between hooves. The edges of disturbed earth tell time better than any clock. Sharp, defined edges mean recent activity, within hours. Slightly rounded edges, maybe a day old. Completely weathered, you're looking at ancient history, probably several days or more. Desert trackers got so good at this they could follow week-old trails across rock and hardpan. Practice makes perfect, and the easiest place to start is your backyard after rain. Walk around, then come back later and read your own story. Were you hurrying, carrying something heavy? You'll be amazed what the ground remembers. Snow works even better. It's like nature's notepad, recording everything in perfect detail. Don't forget about the surrounding clues either. Bent grass springs back slowly, so check if it's still trying to straighten up. Overturned rocks show darker, damp soil underneath that lightens as it dries. Disturbed spider webs mean something passed through recently. Spiders rebuild fast, so anything broken is fresh news. The real skill comes from combining all these tiny details into one clear picture. Native trackers didn't just follow footprints, they read entire stories written in the landscape, where someone paused to rest, when they changed direction, whether they were alone or with others. It's all there waiting to be decoded. Modern trackers still use these exact same principles, and they're incredibly useful for anyone spending time outdoors. Whether you're hunting, hiking, or just curious about the wildlife in your area, the ground is constantly telling stories. But reading tracks is just the beginning of what these survival masters could do with nothing but natural materials around them. Your footsteps just told someone your entire story. Speed, weight, destination, even whether you're injured or carrying a heavy pack. Native American trackers could read the ground like we read text messages, and honestly, it's way more reliable than our phones when things go sideways. Fresh tracks have sharp, clean edges. Makes sense, right? Time rounds everything out through wind, rain, and gravity. A deer print from this morning looks crisp as a cookie cutter. Yesterday's print, softer edges, maybe some debris blown inside. Week-old tracks become shallow depressions that barely whisper their secrets. But here's where it gets interesting. Plains tribes used something called pressure release to track massive bison herds across endless grasslands. When you step down, your foot doesn't just make a print, it pushes dirt in specific directions. Heavy heel means you're walking uphill or carrying weight. Deep toe prints? You're running or moving fast downhill. The Lakota could tell if a buffalo was limping, how many animals passed through, and whether they were spooked or just grazing lazily. Then there's the detective work most people miss entirely. Crushed grass springs back slowly, so really fresh damage still looks bent in the direction of travel. Broken spider webs mean someone passed within hours. Spiders rebuild fast. Fresh scat steams in cold air and attracts flies in warm weather. Scuff marks on rocks show exactly where someone stepped. Well, tracking isn't just about seeing prints. Smart trackers follow the sign-cutting method. Lost the trail? Make a wide circle around the last clear track until you pick it up again. Animals and people both follow natural corridors. Creek beds, ridge lines, game trails carved by generations of hooves and paws. The weird part is how much faster you get once your brain starts connecting the dots. Apache trackers could follow week-old trails across solid rock by noticing tiny scratches, displaced pebbles, or oil smudges from skin contact. They'd track at nearly full walking speed while reading stories most of us would never even notice. And the practical stuff works everywhere. Sand, mud, and snow make perfect practice grounds. Your local park after rain becomes a tracking classroom. Dog prints, jogger footprints, bicycle tire patterns, they all tell stories about speed, direction, and timing. Even in cities, you can read disturbed dust, scuff marks on concrete, or bent fence wire. But why stop at following trails when you can avoid leaving them? Same tribes knew how to step on rocks, walk in stream beds, and brush out tracks with leafy branches. They'd change direction suddenly, backtrack on their own footprints, or split groups to confuse followers. Modern hikers miss obvious safety applications here. Reading tracks means knowing what animals frequent your campsite area. Bear prints in mud near your tent? That's valuable intelligence. Human footprints where no one should be? Time to pay attention. However, there's something even more essential than following tracks. Something that separates amateur outdoor enthusiasts from people who actually survive tough situations. Creating fire without matches or lighters isn't just impressive party trick material. Ever wonder why you can't find water when you desperately need it? Native tribes had this figured out centuries ago. They knew something most people today have completely forgotten. Water doesn't just appear randomly in nature, it follows patterns, leaves clues, and practically announces its presence if you know what to look for. The trick isn't finding a river, it's finding the water that's hiding right under your nose. Here's what blew my mind when I first learned this. You can collect a surprising amount of water just by walking through wet grass. Sounds ridiculous, right? But Plains tribes would tie absorbent cloth or soft leather around their ankles and calves, then walk through dew-covered grass at dawn. After just a few minutes, they'd wring out enough water to drink. The key is timing. Early morning dew is cleanest and most abundant. Well, that's just the beginning. Desert tribes took water collection to another level with solar stills. Dig a pit about 3 feet wide, place a container in the center, then cover the whole thing with plastic or a hide. Put a small rock in the middle of the covering so it dips down like a funnel. As the sun heats the ground, moisture evaporates and condenses on the covering, then drips into your container. Takes patience, but it works even in seemingly dry areas. Then there's the insect trick that most people completely miss. Flies, bees, and mosquitoes rarely venture far from water sources. Watch them carefully at dusk when they're most active. They'll lead you straight to hidden seeps, underground springs, or small pools tucked away in rocks. Apache scouts used this method to find water in places that looked bone dry. But here's where it gets really clever. Rain collection isn't just about having a bucket ready. Indigenous people shape bark into temporary gutters, use large leaves as funnels, and even position animal hides to channel every drop into containers. Modern hikers can do the same with a tarp or poncho. Just create a low point where water naturally flows. The most desperate situation calls for the most creative solutions. Some desert tribes would chew on certain plant roots, agave hearts, yucca stems, or barrel cactus pulp, not necessarily for large amounts of water, but to keep their mouths moist and prevent dangerous dehydration. These plants store water in their tissues, and while you won't get a full drink, you might buy yourself crucial time. And the weird part is how many people walk right past obvious water signs. Green vegetation in otherwise brown areas screams water below. Animal trails often converge near water sources. Even certain bird calls change near water. Pay attention, and you'll start hearing the difference. These water-finding skills become second nature with practice, but staying hydrated is only half the survival battle. Your body loses heat 25 times faster when wet, and hypothermia kills faster than thirst in most situations. That's exactly why mastering insulation techniques might be even more critical than finding water. And some of these traditional methods will completely change how you think about staying warm. When you're stuck outside without a sleeping bag, your body loses heat faster than a politician loses credibility during campaign season. But Native Americans across North America figured out something brilliant. They turned the forest floor into a 5-star mattress that could save your life. Here's the game changer. Debris beds aren't just piles of leaves. They're engineered insulation systems. You need 8 to 12 inches of dry material underneath your body and another layer on top. Why so thick? Your body weight compresses everything by about half, and compressed insulation is about as useful as a chocolate teapot. The Plains tribes knew this science before anyone called it science. They gathered dry grass, dead leaves, pine needles, anything that trapped air. Air is your friend here. It's the ultimate insulator. But here's where most people mess up. They grab whatever's handy. Wrong move. You want the driest stuff you can find. Wet leaves will suck heat from your body faster than you can say hypothermia. Look under rock overhangs, inside hollow logs, or beneath thick tree canopies where rain couldn't reach. Cedar bark is absolute gold if you can find it. The stuff practically begs to keep you warm. Then there's the wind factor. Even a gentle breeze can turn your cozy debris bed into an Arctic nightmare. Northwest peoples built windbreaks using whatever branches they could find, always positioning the opening away from the prevailing wind. Makes sense, right? But they also knew something clever about body positioning. Sleep with your head slightly downhill. Blood flows better, you stay warmer. Now, let's talk about upgrading your clothing on the fly. Cedar bark isn't just for beds. The inner bark can be shredded into soft fibers and stuffed into your jacket or shirt. Cattail fluff works even better if you're near wetlands. That white, fluffy seed material is nature's downfilling. The weird part is how effective dry moss becomes as insulation. Sphagnum moss, the spongy stuff you find in boggy areas, can hold up to 20 times its weight in air when dry. Plains tribes would stuff this into moccasins and clothing during brutal winters. But here's a modern hack that'll blow your mind. Take any jacket or hoodie and stuff the inside with dry leaves or grass. Suddenly you've got a puffy winter coat that costs nothing. The key is layering. Thin layers trap more air than one thick layer. Desert tribes had their own tricks too. They'd sleep in shallow scrapes in the sand, using the earth's retained heat from the day. During cold desert nights, that stored warmth made the difference between sleeping and shivering. Your body is constantly radiating heat in all directions. The ground steals it from below, wind strips it from your sides, and the sky pulls it upward. Native insulation methods attack all three problems at once: smart, efficient, and built from whatever nature provides. Speaking of what nature provides, staying warm is only half the survival puzzle. Your stomach will eventually start demanding attention too, and that's where traditional food knowledge becomes absolutely crucial. Most people think finding food in the wild means hunting rabbits or catching fish. Wrong. Native Americans knew the real treasure was literally growing under their feet and hanging from branches all around them. Plants provided the bulk of their calories, and they had this whole system figured out that puts modern foraging guides to shame. Here's the thing about wild plants. They're everywhere, but knowing which ones won't kill you is the trick. Plains tribes had women who could spot prairie turnips from horseback. These underground gems called tipsin were like finding buried potatoes. Sweet, starchy, and packed with enough energy to keep warriors moving for days. The root looks like a skinny carrot when you dig it up, but it tastes way better than anything you'll find in a grocery store. Then there's the acorn situation. Most people walk right past oak trees thinking acorns are just squirrel food. Native Californians turned these things into their main carb source. But here's what they knew that you probably don't. Raw acorns taste terrible. Bitter as medicine. The tannins will make your mouth feel like you licked sandpaper. The solution? Water leaching. Crush the acorns into meal, then rinse it through baskets lined with pine needles or sand. Keep pouring clean water through until the bitter taste disappears. Takes hours, but what you get is basically nature's flour. Mix it with water, cook it up, and you've got bread that kept entire villages fed through winter. Cattails are like the Swiss Army knife of wild food. You know those tall plants growing in marshy areas with the brown hot dog-looking tops? Every single part is edible at different times of year. Spring shoots taste like cucumber. Summer roots are full of starch. Even the pollen from those brown tops can be shaken into containers and mixed with other foods for extra nutrition. But let's talk about the universal edibility test for a second. You've probably heard about it. The whole rub it on your skin, touch it to your lips, chew a tiny bit routine. Forget it, that's survival desperation mode, and it takes forever. Woodland tribes didn't mess around with mystery plants. They learned from their grandmothers exactly which plants were safe, when to harvest them, and how to prepare them properly. The real secret was fat mixing. Native Americans knew something nutritionists are just catching up to. You need fat to properly absorb nutrients and stay satisfied. They'd mix nuts, seeds, and dried berries with rendered animal fat to create these incredibly nutritious travel foods. Pemmican wasn't just meat and fat like most people think. The best versions included ground-up berries and nuts. Well, here's what gets interesting about all this plant knowledge. It's great to know what to eat, but what happens when you're hurt and need nature's pharmacy instead? Traditional healing plants were just as important as food plants, and some of the remedies they used would surprise modern doctors. Your campfire died hours ago. The temperature dropped 20 degrees. Now you're shivering in a sleeping bag that feels more like a wet paper towel than actual gear. Here's where most people panic and make terrible decisions, like trying to restart that fire at 2 a.m. while half frozen. Native tribes across North America knew something we've completely forgotten. Your bed matters more than your fire. They didn't waste precious energy feeding flames all night. Instead, they built sleeping systems that worked like natural furnaces, keeping them warm until sunrise without burning a single log. The debris bed technique sounds almost too simple to work. You pile dry leaves, grass, pine needles, and small twigs into a mattress about 8 to 12 inches thick. But here's the part most survival guides miss. You need twice as much material as you think. That pile compresses under your body weight, and suddenly your thick bed becomes a thin layer between you and frozen ground. Northwest tribes took this further with cedar bark preparations. They'd strip the inner bark into fiber bundles, stuff them into clothing, and create insulation layers that trapped warm air like modern down jackets. The Plains peoples did something similar with buffalo hair and dried grass, creating winter gear that kept them alive during blizzards that would kill unprepared travelers in hours. Then there's the wind factor everyone ignores until it's too late. Cold air moving across your body steals heat faster than you can generate it. Native shelters always included windbreaks, not just walls, but strategic positioning. They'd build lean-tos with the opening facing away from prevailing winds, creating dead air pockets that held warmth. The really clever part? They'd heat stones by the fire, then bury them in their sleeping areas, natural heating pads that stayed warm for hours. You can do this with smooth river rocks. Never use stones from creek beds or anywhere with moisture because they can explode when heated. Heat them until they're almost too hot to handle, wrap in extra clothing, and place them near your core or feet. Cattail fluff works like nature's cotton stuffing. Those brown seed heads you see in wetlands? Pure insulation gold. Native peoples would collect this fluffy material and use it to line winter clothing, fill gaps in shelters, and create extra layers for sleeping systems. One handful of cattail down can fill a jacket pocket and add serious warmth. Modern outdoor enthusiasts spend hundreds on sleeping bags rated for specific temperatures, but they often ignore the ground insulation completely. A $300 sleeping bag becomes useless when cold earth sucks away your body heat from below. The debris bed technique costs nothing and works in any environment where you can find organic material. Your clothing becomes part of the insulation system too. Stuff dry leaves into jacket pockets, wrap extra material around your core, and create air gaps between layers. Tight clothing kills insulation. Loose layers with dead airspace keep you warm, but staying warm through the night is only half the survival equation. When dawn breaks and you need to move, finding direction without a compass becomes your next critical challenge. Your feet slam into the ground thousands of times each day, yet you probably can't tell me what you stepped on 5 minutes ago. Native Americans turned this basic human action into an art form that could mean the difference between eating dinner and becoming dinner. The ground talks constantly if you know how to listen. Every footstep, every hoof print, every paw pad leaves behind a story written in dirt, mud, and crushed vegetation. Plains tribes could track a single bison across miles of grassland by reading these silent messages. They'd spot a bent blade of grass from 50 feet away and know exactly which direction their dinner wandered off to. Here's where it gets interesting. Fresh tracks have sharp, clean edges like someone just carved them with a knife. But time is the enemy of precision. Wind, rain, and gravity slowly round off those crisp lines until they look soft and weathered. The sharper the edge, the fresher the track. It's nature's timestamp system. Then there's the pressure release method that'll blow your mind. When someone or something changes speed mid-step, their weight distribution shifts. A heel digs deeper when they're slowing down. Toes press harder when they're accelerating. You can literally read someone's walking rhythm from their footprints like sheet music. But tracking isn't just about following animals to your next meal. Look for story tracks that tell you about group size, direction, and urgency. Are the prints evenly spaced and shallow? Someone's taking a casual stroll. Deep heel strikes with long gaps between steps? They're running from something, and you might want to know what that something is. The weird part is how your brain starts rewiring itself once you practice this stuff. Walk through sand, mud, or fresh snow and study what different gaits look like. Notice how your own prints change when you're tired versus energized. Most people stomp through life blind to these details, but once you start seeing tracks everywhere, you can't unsee them. Scuff marks on rocks tell you about balance and load. Fresh animal droppings indicate recent activity and help identify species. Broken twigs at specific heights reveal the size of whatever pushed through. It's like reading a newspaper written in environmental clues. Desert tribes took this even further, following the faintest traces across seemingly barren landscapes. They'd spot a single overturned pebble or a barely visible scrape in hard-pan soil that would be invisible to untrained eyes. These weren't superhuman abilities, just skills developed through daily practice and survival necessity. Modern hikers and hunters still use these techniques today. Military trackers learn similar methods. Even urban environments leave tracking opportunities if you know what to look for. The beauty of this knowledge is its simplicity. You don't need expensive gear or complicated training, just your eyes, some basic principles, and practice time in different terrain types. Start small, track your dog around the yard, or follow deer trails through local woods. Well, tracking gets you information, but what happens when you need to create something from nothing? Like fire without matches or a lighter?